Sorry, I started cracking up backstage because oh, we've never started the show with Baba O'Reilly before, and then I hit me. Do they know how long the intro to Baba O'Reilly is? Oh my God, what a great start. Okay, thank you guys so much for coming out on this fucking cold night. We really appreciate you being here. This is Awkward Teenage Years. By a round of applause, has anyone been into Awkward Teenage Years before? Nobody. Okay. Awesome. We're glad to have you guys here. I am your host, Grant Bowen. Just to kind of let you know what you guys are in store for tonight. This is a storytelling show. You're about to see a lineup of great storytellers come up here to share all true. George Santos is out of Congress, but he is nowhere near this theater. My wife just sent me he's on Cameo now. Like, he's already on Cameo. How much would you pay for a cameo from George Santos? We'll talk later. But no, this is all true stories from our wonderful lineup of guest storytellers to share stories from their teenage years, middle school and high school, stories about taking tests, first dates, first drinks, driving your car, then getting into trouble, and of course, coming of age. It's always a fun time, and we're happy to have you join us here tonight. We'll give our latecomers some time to get here. So why don't I go through a barely rehearsed anecdote for you guys? It's Christmas time now in the city. Everything's decorated. Fifth Avenue is decked out. The tree is up at Rockefeller Center, and of course, in a few places there is ice skating. And I have a very interesting memory of the first time I went ice skating. And to tell you that story, I've got to take you to Florida. I am from Alabama originally, and growing up, my family would frequently vacation in Panama City, Florida. Yeah, some of you know. My aunt had a beach house that was just a few blocks away from the beach, and so we would always go and then go to the beach by day, and at night go have family time out and about in Panama City. Such a thing does exist. And one afternoon, my brothers and I were just looking for something to do. We really were kind of bored out of our minds. And we looked it up and we saw that oh, there's an arcade close by that we have not been to before. Why don't we go check it out? And so our parents drive us over. Mom goes to do her own shopping. Dad takes us into the arcade. And of course, we're bouncing from game to game. It's a lot of fun. And then suddenly we notice that there is this room off to the side. And on the sign it says ice skating rink. And we are confused. We're like, what do you mean ice skating rink? We go through the doorway, and there is what appears to be a small-sized ice rink on the floor, except it is not ice on the floor. It is wax. It is white wax on the floor. And so our curiosity just consumes us, and we go, well, now we have to see what this is. So we go over to the guy who rents out the skates. He smells like cigarettes. We get over there. We ask us for size. He hands us actual ice skates. There are blades on the shoes. And so we lace ourselves up and we get out onto the wax. And what we notice as we get out there is that this wax is covered in rivets from everyone who has skated on the thing. So occasionally you could get shallow enough wax to where you could get maybe a little bit of a glide, for a few inches. And then sometimes you would find a rivet so deep that you would just stay in one place. And of course we are cracking up at this. We think this is absolutely ridiculous. This might be the stupidest thing we have found in the state of Florida. And we often, as time went on, and as my brothers and I grew up, we still talk about it to this day. Cut to 2018. I now live in New York. I'm with my wife, who was then my girlfriend. We are doing our own little out and about, taking in the Christmas decorations and everything. We get to Bryant Park, and we see their ice skating rink. And we decide to get in line. And for the first time, I put on actual ice skates and get on actual ice. And for a first-timer, I'm doing pretty great. Like, I get a nice glide going across the ice, small steps. I do not fall once. And by the end of it, it ends up just being this very romantic outing with me and my girlfriend. And as we get off, she goes, I cannot believe you didn't fall once. Are you sure you've never ice skated before? And I was like, well, technically I have. And let's get this show started. Thank you guys so much. Our first storyteller of the night, sorry. This is the post of George Santos being on TikTok. Our first storyteller of the night has maybe my favorite introduction. He's a returning guest, maybe the best introduction we have had for any guest on this show. He loves French fries. Please welcome Esmond Fountain.
Grant, Panama City. I grew up in Florida. That is a place where I found my first love, also saw my first breast, and also got my heart broken, all in the same place. Thank you. I was raised a military child. My dad, he was in the Coast Guard, so we moved every 2-3 years, and we had to live on military bases the whole time. And so if you've never heard of a military base, basically it's a very secure, protected place. One of the most protected places in the country. Everything is safe on a military base except for your marriage. Don't take it anywhere. Don't take it anywhere near the military. But I was on a base in Florida, and I was with my best friends, two of my best friends. Their names was Madison and Alvin, and we were at this place called the Exchange, which is basically a bodega for military people. And we were going, it was their first time, and we were going down every aisle, and I was extremely hungry. We had spent the whole day at the beach, and I just needed food. And at this point in my life, I didn't have a lot of money, and the only thing that cured all of my hunger every time was Snickers bars. I had got into the marketing. I bought into it, the whole you're not you when you're hungry. I bought a Snicker bar for everything. Girl broke my heart, got a Snicker bar. Didn't have any money. I just would go and get a Snicker bar, and it would last me for at least 2 days. And I remember we were in there, and I realized that this was going to take longer than 5 minutes. And so I grabbed a Snicker bar, and we were going down the aisles, and I ate it. And I still, to this day, don't know why I did this. But I took the wrapper from the Snicker bar after I finished, and I just put it on an aisle. And we kept going throughout the store. We checked out, paid for everything, and then we went next door to the commissary, where it's kind of like where military people get groceries. We bought groceries for a grill, not a grill, but a cookout that we were having later in the day. And we go to check out. And as we're walking out of the commissary, 2 police officers walk up to me. And they say, we need you to come with us right now. And they kind of open up, and there's a smaller lady right there. She's like, that's him. Get his ass. I watched him from the time that he got in. And I had no idea what was going on. I was kind of confused. I had forgot all about the Snicker bar. They take me into this cold, windowless room, and the cops sit me down, and I'm like, guys, what am I in here for? I am so innocent. I didn't do anything. Why am I in here? Why did you choose me? And the cop looks at me and says, did you steal a Snicker bar today? I was like, in my head, I was like, I'm definitely not innocent. Definitely not. But I watched enough Law and Order to know that I'm innocent until proven guilty. And so I looked at the cop, and I said, you know what? No, I didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. I know that you cops think that all black people look the same, but I'm not the one. I didn't do this. He said, are you done? I said, yes. He said, well, we actually have video of you walking into the store with this same shirt on, taking a Snicker bar, putting it on the counter, on the aisle, and walking out of the store without paying for it. So I'm going to ask you again, and I want you to be careful how you answer this. did you steal a Snicker bar today? And I said, yeah, actually, I remember that vaguely. Yes, I did steal a Snicker bar. And he said, okay, I'm gonna go fill out some paperwork. I'll be back. And he got up. Both of the cops got up and left. And they left me in the room with that lady who watched me on the monitor. And I cannot express to you how strong her death stare was. But she just sat there and stared at me as if I stole the last Snicker bar in the world that she was planning to feed her family with. I don't know why she hated me so much. But I just remember feeling ashamed and embarrassed. My parents, they raised us to be good black men and to not get in trouble and stay in line. And I felt like I had let them down. This lady, she watched me from the time that I walked in the store, which felt racist. But she expected me to steal, and I did exactly that. And it kills me to know that. I sat there for 42 minutes in that room. The cop finally came back, and he said, he took a photo of me, which is that photo. And he said, you're banned from the base for a whole year. I don't want to see you. And then he gave me a fine for $250. And then he pulled out the wrapper out of his pocket and said, I want you to go pay for this Snicker bar as well. And I remember I got up out of there, and I walked to the cashier, and I paid for the Snicker bar, and I paid my fine. And I asked the cashier, I was like, hey, can I keep the wrapper? And she's like, okay, that's fine. And so I kept the wrapper. I still keep it in my wallet. I don't have it with me today, but I keep it in there just to keep me from doing dumb things. But after that, I felt so bad. I was so ashamed. And I felt like I had let black people down. I was having this nightmare for a couple of days after that. In Christianity, you die and then you go to heaven, and God and the homies, they decide if they want to let you into the party or not. Well, in this dream, I died, and I went to a black council meeting. And it was basically an auditorium with a bunch of black people. It was basically Wakanda. And, there was a table with 3 black leaders at the table. It was Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, and Justin Timberlake. And they read off to me my black sins, and they brought up the Snicker bar, and I didn't have an excuse for it. And so I had a punishment. 3 things happened to me. 1, I got my black card revoked immediately. I also got my inward pass revoked. And then the 3rd thing was they hooked me up into a table and put a bunch of cords in me, and they sucked all the melanin out of me right then and there. And they gave it to the next available recipient, which happened to be Drake. Drake took my melanin. I walked around with black guilt for a long time after this. Like, I just felt like I didn't deserve to be black for this, because this lady, I would be her example when she says that all black men steal. And she would use me as that example, and then I just hated having that on me. I felt really bad, and then I learned who Candace Owens was. I saw what Kanye did, and I was like, I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. But now when I tell people this story, everyone's like, Esmond, why would you go on a military base and steal a Snicker bar? And the only thing I can say is, you're not you when you're hungry. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Oh my God! Now I want us to make that as like a short film where we see it play out, and then at the very end we throw up a Snickers ad. That's almost like a perfect premise for a commercial for sure. Wow, that's great. How crazy is it that Justin Timberlake made the council? What did he do? I guess he's got something working out for him nowadays. Anyway, one more time for Esmond, everybody. Our next storyteller, I just found out at the beginning of the show, is a fellow Alabamian. She's studied storytelling at the Magnet Theater and with Adam Wade, a former guest, and the Story Studio with David Crabb, another former guest. She's been featured on the Risk podcast under a mysterious pseudonym, to which she wrote, "So good luck finding that one." She met her husband, Bryan, while they were both performing with the People's Improv Theater. She's also studied at the Upright Citizens Brigade and the Magnet Theater. Currently, she is pursuing a certificate in floral design at the New York Botanical Garden. And by day, you can find her walking people's dogs with her one-woman dog walking company, Gotham Pets NYC. She would love to have her own dog, but for now, she's content being owned by her 2 cats, Dinah and Rabbit. Please welcome Dawn Harris.
His name was Sam Hall, and he was kind of a bad boy. He drove a red Ford Mustang, and he wore he would go to school wearing like combat boots and a kilt and like a Bad Religion t-shirt with like weird belts, and he would like spike his hair out, and I found it incredibly hot. We met doing the High School Musical, and just kind of like, he was just super funny, and from his bad exterior, he was just such a sweet guy, and we started hanging out mostly with his friends, and I would watch them play video games because I didn't play. And you know, one night I show up expecting all the guys to be there, but it's just me and him. And you know, he opens the door and he's like, "You want to watch a movie?" And like my heart was like pounding, and I was like, okay. And he like took me by the hand and he led me upstairs to the game room, and there is just like a TV, computer, video game stuff, and a couch. And he puts on Ghost in the Shell because of course he liked anime as well. And we're watching it, and his leg is like touching mine, and his arm like snakes around my shoulder, and I'm like super turned on, and the movie ends, and like the credits are rolling, and we're rolling around on the floor like kissing and like clumsily grinding on each other. And I'm like freaking out because I don't know how far this is gonna go. So I stop and I stand up and I'm like, I don't want to be late for curfew. Thank you so much. Bye. And I left. And the next time I saw him was after rehearsal. He took me behind the auditorium, and he's like, "Hey, it seemed like you were having a good time the other night. Is everything okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I was just super nervous." And he was like, "Well, I think you're gorgeous, and I would like to be your boyfriend." So I said yes. And we started dating, and suddenly all the love songs were about us. And it was just like everything I'd ever wanted. Nobody had ever asked me out before, and so I was just taking everything I could. And you know, our relationship progressively got more and more physical, and on June 15th, 2000, I decided to have sex for the first time with Sam. It was my first time, not his. And I now know it wasn't great sex, but to me it was like, the world is alive. And it was all I wanted to do the entire summer. And so, you know, like his parents would go to work, he'd call me, and I'd come over and we'd have sex. And like one rainy day, I'm there and we've just had mildly okay sex. And I'm like, we were learning. And I'm like laying there on his chest, and he's like looking at me lovingly, and I'm looking at him lovingly, and he says, "Dawn, I think you have 2 vaginas." I guess I'll die now. What? What? Why would you say that? And he's like, what? I don't know, I think you have 2 vaginas. And I was like, explain to me exactly why you think this. And he's like, I don't know, there's like 2 holes down there. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? But in my head, it actually kind of tracks. Because I've had this routine that I wasn't really thinking about where, like I would have to use 2 tampons, and I thought that that was just because I had a really heavy flow, but I was like, I actively push one to the right and one to the left. So I went to the gynecologist, who was this woman named Pam, who had known me since I was little. And I walk in, I'm like, hi, Pam. I'm having sex now. Don't tell my mom. Also, I might have 2 vaginas. And she's like, oh. Okay, what makes you say that? And I was like, well, my boyfriend told me. And she's like, okay, all right, let's check. So she gives a look and she says, you're perfectly normal. Everything is fine. You do have a regular cycle, so be very careful. Here's all the condoms we have. And don't listen to teen boys about your body. And I went back to Sam and I told him I was fine. And he was like, okay, I guess that's fine. And we didn't talk about it anymore. Now, when we started dating, Sam was a senior and I was a junior. And towards the end of the summer, he goes off to college, takes like 2 steps onto the campus of Savannah College of Art and Design, and dumps me immediately. And my heart shatters. And eventually I persevere and I go on and I meet new people. Jump to May 7th, 2015. I go on my first date and have sex for the first time with the man that is now my husband, Bryan. And when we started thinking about kids, I was getting a little nervous because I was like, I think there's something physically wrong with me, and I'm not sure that I want kids. But that wasn't a deal breaker. It was like, if we don't have kids, it'll be okay. I just want to be with you, And so we got fertility testing at the NYU Fertility Center. And in 5 minutes, 23 years of feeling gaslit is just like lifted from me, because I don't have 2 vaginas. I had what is called a complete septate uterus with a longitudinal vaginal septum. So what that means is that there is a a line of fibrous tissue that starts at the top of the uterus, runs through the cervix, and all the way down the vaginal canal. And so that means that if we want to have kids, we're going to have surgery. And that's because if an egg tries to attach to the septum, there's no blood flow, so it'll fail. And if it does attach to like a part that has blood flow, the baby could run out of room eventually and cause preterm labor or miscarriage. So we went for the surgery, and it went very well. Everything's, back in working order. And I was so elated to finally feel such validation and to feel a sense of hope that, like, my body could do this. But also very frustrated because I asked, I can't tell you how many gynecologists if I had 2 vaginas. And it was so embarrassing. And they all said no, but I just knew something was different, And I think about Sam a lot. Like, what he told me never left my mind. Like, obviously, I'm talking about it right now. And he made me honestly feel bad about my body. He made me feel like I was weird. And I found out that he was telling all of his friends about it. And when I, had to tell Bryan about it, he didn't judge me. He accepted me for who I am and my body as it is. And I just wish I could go back and tell her that everything's going to be okay, and you're not different, you're not totally weird, you were born unique, and there's nothing wrong with that. Thanks.
Wow, man. Women, do not listen to teenage boys talk about your... Do not listen to teenage boys talk about most things. We do not have the knowledge or the taste regarding anything. Wow, one more time for Dawn, everybody. A quick announcement I forgot to make at the top of the show. I apologize for this. The bar is open. If anyone would like to pour one out for young Esmond and young Dawn, absolutely. Just all that we ask is that you wait until I'm up here. I am but your humble host. We want to pay our respects to our guests and everything. So thank you guys so much. Feel free to get a drink. Our next storyteller is a core cast member of Spooky Doings Improv. A co-creator of the show Missed Connections that played the Frigid Festival many years. How many is many years ago?
10. A long time ago.
Great. And is currently the style icon that still has the blazer you are about to see in the photo on screen. Please welcome Jennifer Anderson.
I entered my teenage years in the mid to late 90s, and man, was that a fantastic time to be a teenager. We had Britney Spears and the emergence of the internet, and Backstreet Boys versus NSYNC and Friends, which is now on Nick at Night, and that causes a lot of cognitive dissonance. But I wasn't really interested in any of the current pop culture phenomena of the day. I didn't care about Justin versus JC. I was completely obsessed with a 1980s television show called Heart to Heart. Does anybody know what that show is? Has anybody heard of it? No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Heart to Heart starred Robert Wagner as Jonathan Hart and Stephanie Powers as Jennifer Hart. And they were this very jet-setting, wealthy married couple that was madly in love with each other. And he was handsome and strapping and a self-made millionaire, and she was tall and gorgeous with the perfect body. And they lived in this expansive Bel Air mansion with 3 Mercedeses apiece and a dog and a butler, and everything about their life was completely and totally idyllic, except for the fact that all these pesky murders kept happening around them all the time. But that was okay because they used their charm and their intellect to solve each murder each week, only sometimes relying on help from appropriate law enforcement. And justice would prevail, and they would end each episode by making passionate love in their king-size bed. And I still remember the very first episode of Heart to Heart that I saw when I was homesick from school one day. And in Jonathan and Jennifer, I saw these 2 people that were the antithesis of everything that I felt that I was. Here were 2 people that were so effortlessly confident, that had this great love story and wore these beautiful clothes, and I looked like that. My mom bought my clothes at the plus size section in JCPenney, and I'll remind everybody that in the 90s, our style icon was Kate Moss, and we thought that Jessica Simpson was fat at a size 6, so body positivity didn't really exist. And the more I got into Heart to Heart, the more obsessed that I got, the worse I started to feel about myself. The divide between the 2 realities just got a little bit bigger. But when you're that age, you don't really have the self-awareness to step away and say, this isn't making me feel good, let me find something else that does make me feel good. Instead, I chased that serotonin bump and made a full escape from my own life into the life of the Harts. When I got to high school, I wouldn't say that my obsession cooled any. I still got made relentless fun of by my friends for having this weird niche obsession, and I still wore heart jewelry unironically. But I started to find some things that filled my time a little bit more like you do in high school. And one of those things was the debate team. I competed in original oratory, and I have to say I was pretty good. I competed at the national level and won a bunch of tournaments, and it was really starting to help me build my confidence a little bit. One day after school in my sophomore year, on one of my deep heart-to-heart internet dives, I found out that Robert Wagner, the Jonathan Hart, was going to be in a play in Daytona Beach, which was about 3 hours away from my hometown, and I flipped out. I was so excited. This was my opportunity to meet Jonathan Hart in the flesh, and I knew that as soon as he met me and I profused my love for Heart to Heart, he would be totally enamored with me and introduce me to Stephanie Powers, and we would dine in LA together. I begged my mom for tickets, and of course she got them for me because I was spoiled rotten. And I went to go put the event in my calendar, and I saw that I had a debate tournament on the same day. But I wasn't worried because I figured I'd just do the debate tournament during the day. It would end at around 5. We could make it in time for an 8 o'clock curtain. So the day of the debate tournament came, and I was doing pretty good. And I had made it to the semi-final rounds. But we had gotten a late start that day. Some of the judges had gotten lost on the way. And I did some time math, and I realized that if I had advanced to the final round, there would be no way I would make it in time for the show. So I did something that I regret 20 plus years later still. I threw the round. I tripped over my words. I left about 2 minutes out of my speech on purpose, and I didn't make it to the finals, but I didn't care because I was going to get to see Jonathan Hart in the flesh. And I sat there in the audience and stared at this man in complete and total adoration for the entire 2.5-hour run of A.R. Gurney's Love Letters, which is a really, really, really boring play, but it didn't matter. When the curtain dropped, I stood up and I grabbed one of the pictures that I had from my room that I had adorned my entire walls with when I was a kid, and I went to the line with other women that were maybe 30 or 40 or 50 years old, and I waited for him to come out. And when I saw him, my heart started beating, and I started going over and over and over and over in my head of what I would say to him when he finally came to me. And he got to me, and I held out my picture, and I said, RJ, because of course I knew that that was his nickname. I just love you, and I love Heart to Heart, and I'm totally and completely obsessed. And before I could even get the rest of my sentence out, he had lazily made his signature across his face, kind of grunted in my general direction, and then continued to make his way down the line. You know things intellectually when you're that age. You know that Jonathan Hart's not real and Jennifer Hart's not real and this existence that they have is totally fictional, but it's harder to know things like that emotionally, especially when you have hormones running through your body at full speed all the time. And I realized then that this whole existence that I had poured myself into was totally and completely non-existent. I had devoted so much time to these people and so much time to their lives, and I used it to kind of beat myself up over and over again for all of the things that I wasn't, that they were, but they weren't anything. Jonathan Hart wasn't this strapping romantic guy that loved his wife. He was just an actor that was kind of a dick. So while that interaction completely broke my heart at the time, I'm very grateful for it because it allowed me to step out of this kind of weird, crazy obsession that I had and step into my own life. And there was a lot of things that I had to be proud of that I didn't really realize until then. And let's be honest, that guy knows way more about Natalie Wood's death than he's leading on.
You know, as a former debate team member myself, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. No, I get it. I gotta tell you, I was just watching Austin Powers yesterday. That dude's still alive. Like, he's 93.
He's so old.
That is wild.
He was 69 when I was, and people made fun of me for being in love with the 69. He was 69, and now he's, I don't know, he's on his way to.
See, at least you were watching, like, Heart to Heart. Had I met him, I would be doing my Dr. Evil impression. Yeah, and I'm sure he hates that way more.
Well, that makes more sense.
Yeah. One more time for Jennifer. Oh, God. All right. Our next storyteller is a returning guest. We're happy to have him back, and we will always be happy to have him back many, many times. He is the host of the podcast Love Hurts. His show, Running Scared, just played at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival this past summer. Please welcome Bryan Berlin.
Thank you. So when I was growing up, I played a lot of rec soccer, which I feel like is the official sport of the suburbs. You know, like that was I don't know what it was, but I think there was something about like parents getting their kids up to get to like an 8 a.m. game, get them dressed, get them out in a field, and then just like chase around a ball for an hour as they're yelling at the refs. Like it brought out some kind of like, this is what we want as parents. I don't know. But it was a lot. Like, and I only know this because I eventually became a ref when I was in high school. And it was so aggressive. The parents were awful that especially in my town was really competitive, even at this rec level. And there was a weekend every year when I would ref that they called like the weekend of silence. And no parents or coaches were allowed to talk to the refs at all because it was so aggressive all the time. And so that's what it was like. That was like the level of competitiveness in my town. And as I was growing up, I was playing soccer and my dad was the coach, which, you'd think means like I'd get the best spot on the team. Like if it was baseball, I'd get to be the shortstop because everyone wanted to be the shortstop when I was growing up because of Derek Jeter. But soccer, I got stuck playing goalie. And the reason this happened was because goalie's kind of the most stressful position in soccer. Like everyone else is running around the field having a great time, and the goalie is just sitting there stressed out waiting for like the whole game to rely on whether or not they can keep a ball out of the net. And no one on my team wanted to play goalie. Nobody. Like it was just like, who's gonna play goalie? Nobody. And my dad was like, all right, Brian, you're playing goal. Like I was the sacrificial lamb of my soccer team. And it was miserable. Like my anxiety level like could not handle it. I would spend the entire game in net like thinking about all the bad things that were about to happen at any given moment, right? Because the kids are running around in circles like trying to get control of the ball, and then all of a sudden you're called into action. And my adrenaline would just build and build and build, and then all of a sudden I'd be called into action, and I'd like go run out, I'd like trip over the grass, I'd hurt myself. And then just start crying, like as impact, I just like would feel pain, and I also feel like the anxiety would burst, and I'd cry. And my dad would come out on the field, and he'd just be looking down at me like this like sad guy on the ground, and he'd be like, hey Brian, like come on, toughen up, man up. And I know when he would say man up, that meant like stop being a baby, stop crying. And I'd look out when he'd say that, and I would see everyone at the field, all the parents and everybody looking at me, and it would only make me cry more because now I knew that I was like the spotlight. And it just felt awful. And then the only good part about it was then I'd get carted off the field, not carted, but walk off the field. They didn't bring out the thing, the medical team and get me on the gurney. But I'd limp off to the field, and then my only relief was I didn't have to play goal anymore. And this happened like throughout middle school. Like my dad was our coach through 8th grade. And I got to a point where I'd say, Dad, I'll play goalie for a half, but I want to play out in the field the second half. And it was miserable. But once high school came around, he couldn't coach anymore. Like I was the high school team. And I finally felt like this freedom from being able to play goalie. I was really excited. At this point, like all my friends were friends that played soccer. And, I was hanging out with them like a week before. There's tryouts. It's not just like you make the team. And there was 3 teams at my school. There was a varsity team, a JV team, and a freshman team. And I'm like, well, at least make the freshman team. But like a week before tryouts, I'm hanging out with my friends, and we're all talking about tryouts and how we're feeling about it. And one of my friends is like, oh, how are you feeling about having to run 2 miles? And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, to make the team, you have to run 2 miles in 16 minutes. And I'm doing the math in my head. And like thinking about my only running experience up to this point, which is the presidential fitness test. Yeah, people know the presidential fitness test, right? Like you do some push-ups and sit-ups, and then you get like a signed letter from Bill Clinton saying you were in shape. And I don't know why he was the arbiter of that, but it was just like... Anyway, my presidential fitness event was the sit and reach, which is you literally would sit and see how far you could reach out past your feet. Like to this day, I can still like almost... full hands on the ground, right? But the mile, it was all, I feel like they always made it the last event of the presidential fitness too. Like everything would build to having to run 4 laps around the track. And like that first lap, I would already be tired. The second lap, I'd be bored, and I would just be like limping and crawling my way to the finish. I think you had to do it in 10 minutes, and I'd always do it in like 9 minutes and 58 seconds. And so I'm doing that math of like, okay, it takes me 10 minutes to run 1 mile. So I have to run that second mile at 6 minutes. I don't think that's possible. And now I'm like we're a week out from tryouts, and all I'm thinking about is like the pressure of I can't run 2 miles. I can't make this team. And we show up on the first day of tryouts, and there's like 50 kids there. And the coaches are like, all right, guys, we're going to start with a warm-up mile, which I'm like, that's a lot for we're going to do practice after this, but we do this warm-up mile. And out of those 50 kids there, I am the last person to cross the finish line. Like nowhere near the 8 minutes I'd have to run 1 mile at. And the rest of the day, I'm just stressing myself out with like, how am I supposed to do this? Like, I'm not doing well in the tryouts because all I can think about is I can't run 2 miles. And I get home that night and I have this like kind of pain in my heel. And it is a real pain, but I kind of lean into it a little bit with my parents. Like, hey, mom and dad, my heel's kind of hurting. I think I should take a day off to make sure it's okay so I could be back at tryouts the next day. And they were like, yeah, you know what? You want to be okay. And so like that one day became 2 days, became a week. And I just never went back to tryouts. Like I was so scared of failing that I didn't even try. And to be clear, there's no way I would have been able to run that. Like it's not. But like the thing that I did find is like they kind of had a high school rec league. Like I didn't know. I thought you got to middle school and it was like you can then play high school soccer or that's it. And there was a co-ed rec league. So it was just kind of like all the kids who still wanted to play soccer but didn't want to run 2 miles in 16 minutes. They're like, great, here's this place for you. And I joined it, and there was no coaches, so my dad couldn't coach. And it was incredible. Like, it was so fun to just be able to play soccer without having this pressure on me. I remember, like, the teams got put randomly together, and there was this junior girl on the team, Julie Kazaba, who was beautiful, and she thought I was funny, and I was like, what is going on? Like, I've never experienced something like this before. And so I kind of like found my people and my thing, and like my love of soccer kind of only built from there. And it was this thing that I don't think would have ever happened had I been like stuck on the miserable high school team, like the worst kid on the team that's just dragging everyone behind. So it's really nice to find my place and like keep playing soccer today. Although I will say, if you join any of the leagues around here, there's always the guy who's like is living out his glory high school days. Like, yeah, I'm playing at the highest competition level where I'm just like, I just don't want to get hurt and like have a good time. So yeah, thank you very much.
Oh my God, school sports are so cruel. It truly is. Do you know how many stories I could share from gym class that end with me crying? Several. I've only shared one on this show. You want to know why? Because it's the same story every time. One more time for Bryan, everybody. All right, are you guys having fun? Are you guys having a good time? Yeah. All right, that's great. We're going to do a little housekeeping here before we bring up our last storyteller. Because maybe you guys have been watching the show and you think, oh, this makes me think of something that happened to me when I was in high school or middle school. Maybe I could do this show as well. Well, we'd love to hear from you. We are constantly looking for pitches. Send us 2 or 3 sentences of your story idea. You can send them to awkwardteenageyears@gmail.com. We are getting ready for 2024. So we send them in. We know we have dates in advance. We'd love to know when we can have you on. We are on social media. You can follow us on there for future shows and updates. We're on Twitter. No, we're not. We're on Instagram, Facebook. Our Twitter is dead. We put the bird down. We've got a Threads, but we're not on it, but neither is anyone else. And a little history of the show here. We've been doing the show since the Frigid Festival in 2020, which was back in February of that year. It was the last live show a lot of people went to that year. But shortly after that, Will, who co-created the show, had the idea that we should move everything online. So we started doing live streams on Twitch until things reopened, and ever since we've been here at Under St. Mark's. Yeah, thank you. We have kept an archive of our previous shows, so you can see some of the previous guests we have had on. So if you'd like, go subscribe to us at Awkward Teenage Years on YouTube. We've got almost our full show archive, except for that one night where everything was broken. We'll tell you about that later. And yeah, sure. Anyway, thank you guys so much. And now, without further ado, let me bring up our final storyteller of the night. He is the creator of the show Solo, a show about friendship, and he was featured on an episode of This American Life. We're very excited to have him, Gabe Mollica.
Hey, everybody. I don't think art is a competition. I really don't. But when you have a show called Awkward Teenage Years and someone tells a story about how a kid thought they had 2 vaginas, I mean, that person wins. I mean, that's the winner. I think we can all agree that's how that works. I loved all the stories tonight. This has been really fun to just like watch a show. Because up until right now, I've been one of you, which has been very nice. Okay, so I recently like quit my day job to like do whatever this is, and it's I've been having like when I started like writing and performing and stuff like that, I feel like all my conversations with people would be about like the art we love or like the movies we love or like the podcast we listen to is very like art focused. And now I feel like all the conversations I have with like comedians and performers are very different. There's an old joke that comedians used to tell each other called the aristocrats. And it's like a very vulgar joke, and it was a joke that comedians told each other. And now we don't have that joke anymore. Now the joke that performers tell each other is called who books that? And the way the job works is that you explain a very real performance that you did, and you're like, it was in a tent in New Jersey, and the whole audience was playing beer pong, and there's a train running by in the back, and there's fireworks, and there's people under the stage having sex, shaking the stage, and you followed a magician. And then everyone goes, what did it pay? And the person will be like, oh, like it was like, like $60 and a chicken Caesar salad. And then everyone in unison is like, who books that? And the reason is because like it's just like financially we live in New York City. It's just like we're trying to make it in the arts, so you take all these terrible gigs. And I've found that like a lot of other, particularly in my 20s, I'm 31 now, but like particularly in my 20s, like I sacrificed a lot of like the things that like normal people do in their 20s. Like I'm approaching the age where my parents were when they like got married and bought a house and had kids, and like I don't have any of that. Like I have the Notebook, like that's it. That's what I have. That's my contribution. And I have a weird relationship with money because when I was a kid, my dad worked in horse racing. My dad's job when I was a kid is that he was a sports agent for a jockey. And what that means is that a jockey would hire my dad, and then my dad would decide which horses that jockey would ride. Okay, so when that jockey won races, we would have money. And when that jockey lost races or fell off and got hurt or my dad got fired or like whatever, we did not have money. And when I was a kid, I did not know that that is a weird job. And so I'd go to school and kids would be like, my dad's a doctor. And I was like, is there any money in that? Does your dad not have a little man who rides animals for gold? Because that's what we're doing. That's super normal in my house. And so as I was growing up, my dad like had a dream. My dad's dream was since the time I can remember having a father. My dad's dream, he would always talk about it, was that he wanted to be a lawyer. It's a very boomer dream. The millennial equivalent is like, oh, I hope one day I could be in Harry Potter, But for him, he's like, I want to be a lawyer, and because horse racing, it's like a selfish business, It's a lot of competition. It's like an old school kind of. There's no written contracts. It's all verbal, yelling at each other. It's very kind of a vulgar place. And I think my dad like wanted to be a lawyer, where like even when you like. Even people who are on opposite sides, like there's a respect. There's like, we all went to school and we're all wearing suits. And like, there's like and he wanted to yell at each other in that new context. And so he wanted to be a lawyer and he would talk about it constantly. And my dad actually took the LSAT in the 80s and in the 90s and again in the 2000s. And he never went to law school. And actually his score got worse every year, every time. It's very rare in life that you have like real data of like society being like, don't do this. You know, like he had the data, you know, it was like everyone was telling him not to do it. And finally, when I was in 8th grade, he took the LSAT again, and he applied, and he got in. And it was very exciting. And like many members of our Supreme Court, he went to Hofstra. And in the night program, which has since been discontinued. My theory is that like it was just made for Drew, and once he finished, they were like, it's fine. We don't need to do this anymore. My dad loves the night program. Anyway, so he was set to it was a 4-year program at night, and I entered high school and he entered 1L. And so we were set to graduate the same year, seniors 10. And it was very exciting when he was going to graduate, and he worked very hard during law school. He loved it. He was obsessed with it. It was the only thing he wanted to talk about. And in the spring of my senior year of high school, his senior year, 4L year of law school, we're going to go to his graduation, which is very emotional. It's very emotional when you get to like see somebody live their dream, their like 35-year dream. It's like it's not something you see every day. And so we went to the ceremony. Chuck Schumer gave the speech. It was a bummer, but he was there, and so that was fun. And the whole time, I have this like this very odd stomach ache, and like I don't know what is wrong. To give you like a very millennial analogy, it kind of felt like there was like a Dementor in my stomach. Like everything was like moving in, you know? And it just like I hadn't felt this before. And I thought the reason that I had a stomach ache was because earlier in the day, my friends and we had gone to the combination Pizza Hut Taco Bell. And I had had both Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, which is informally what's known as the Oppenheimer. Yeah, just because we could do something, no one asked if we should. So I had the Pizza Hut Taco Bell, but I have this terrible stomach ache. And I think like, oh, I'm just nervous emotion. Maybe I pulled the muscle in my stomach. I don't know what's going on. And the next day I go to school and I feel okay. And then that next night, that Monday night, is my dad's law school graduation, rather graduation party, which is a very odd party because it's filled with jockeys who have literally won the Kentucky Derby and federal circuit court judges. It's kind of like in high school when someone does very different activities and then has a birthday. And you're like, what's the offensive line doing with the tenor section? You know, it's like very confusing. And so we're at this party, and my stomach like now like really starts to hurt. Like it's terrible. And I've never felt this pain before. And I go to somebody at the party, and they're like a nurse. And I was like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, like, is it moving down? And I was like, I think so. I think it's moving down. I'm like, is it moving down and then like moving across? And I was like, I think so. And they're like, oh, that's like appendicitis, like textbook appendicitis. We'll have to take out your appendix, but like you don't need your appendix, so like it'll be fine. And I'm like, okay, like I'm a little bummed that like it's my dad's night, and now I'm gonna have to go to the hospital. You know, it took 35 years, and now I have to go to the hospital. So I go to the hospital, and I had like what I would consider like a cool doctor. He was like too cool almost, where he was just like, you don't need a CAT scan or a PET scan. We're just gonna put you right into surgery. You 100% have appendicitis. And so I'm like, okay. And they put me in, and they're gonna take it out laparoscopically, which is through your belly button. And very simple. There's like 4 of us lined up. Bang, bang, bang. The doctors knock them out. And I wake up in my hospital bed in the hallway. And they don't have a room for me yet. And I'm like, I'm so thirsty. Like, can I have something to drink? And they're like, no. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you can't have anything to drink. We can give you ice chips. And I'm like, why can't I just have water? That doesn't make any sense. And like, we'll tell you later. And I pass out. And I wake up the next morning in a hospital room. And the doctors come in and they tell me that you, Gabe, have a perforated ileum. Your ileum is perforated. And I was like, you're going to have to use at least one word that I know. I mean, that doesn't make, I don't know what that means. And your ileum is the muscle that connects your large intestines to your small intestines. and a perforation means there's a hole in it. There was a hole in my stomach. And so the reason it hurt is because the hole popped, and then it was okay, and then it started to hurt again the next night when all that acid and stuff started to leak out, all internally, so I can't see any of this. And so they explained that to me, and so when I wake up, I have like staples. I have this giant line of staples all across my stomach. When I lose a little bit more weight, I'll show you. And so I have this big scar right here, and it's very painful. I like can't laugh, because it just hurts too much. And there's staples like in my belly button all the way in, and on this side too, and they're just everywhere. And my dad, who was at his graduation party, is just seated in the corner, just silent. When stuff like this happens, my dad kind of like clams up, and he always shows up, but he doesn't say anything, which that's kind of his love language, is just like being there. And so he's just sitting in the corner, and slowly like people in my life start to find out that first that I'm in the hospital, then that it's appendicitis, then that it's not appendicitis, like it starts to no pun intended, leak. And people are finding out, and so people start visiting me. And the first person to visit me is my best friend from high school, Nick. And Nick comes, and he's like, dude, you missed it. We all saw the movie MacGruber. And remember, it hurts to laugh. So I'm like, please do not tell me about the movie MacGruber. It will hurt me. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I got to tell you about the movie MacGruber. I'm like, please do not tell me about the movie MacGruber. And he's like, the name of the villain in the movie MacGruber is Dieter von Kuntz. And I laughed so hard a staple popped out. And I'm laughing, and it hurts, and I'm mad at Nick, but I'm happy that he's there. That's his love language. And the next person that visits me is my friend Sean. And the thing about Sean is that he's a fucking idiot. He's like a big idiot. And to give you an example of what Sean is like, Sean likes to make people artwork out of his own pubes. He'll like shave his pubes off, and then he'll glue them to a thing that he's drawn, and he'll put it in a picture frame, and it'll be like your name, or it'll be like a sunset with pubes. Most famously, he made somebody a picture of Lionel Richie, and Lionel Richie's hair was the pubes, and the line on it was, hello, is it pubes you're looking for? And so Sean will do that. That's kind of Sean's deal. And now, unsurprisingly, he works at Con Ed. So if your utilities are bad, that's who's fixing the pipes. But he makes more money than all of us. It's actually pretty unfair. But so Sean comes, and the third person that comes is my mother's priest, Father John. And Father John comes, and he gives me, in the Catholic faith, what's known as last rites. That's when they give to people before they die. It's one of the sacraments. It's like marriage or becoming a priest or First Communion. But they're like, don't worry, we rebranded. It's no longer last rites. It's now called the Sacrament of the Sick. And the thing about getting the Sacrament of the Sick is that it feels a lot like getting last rites. And so the priest comes with the holy oil, and he draws a cross on your forehead, and he says the prayers or whatever. And I was there in the hospital 10 days, and there's only 2 people that visited me twice. And those 2 people are, of course, Sean and Father John. And the second time they each come was at the exact same moment. And so Sean and Father John have met each other in the hospital. And Father John, of course, knows Sean already because Sean was kicked out of Catholic school. And so he knows Sean, and he sees Sean, and he's like, Sean, do you want to give Gabe the Sacrament of the Sick? I've already given it to him. You should give it to him. And Sean is like, absolutely. And so Father John is behind him, and he's above me, and my dad is sitting over there, and Sean dips his finger in the holy oil and leans over my forehead and draws a penis. And the only person who can see this is my father, who's just kind of shaking his head, he just knows what's happening. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I'm becoming the age my parents were when they really settled down and bought a house and had kids and marriage, and I don't really have any of that stuff. And so I've been thinking about this so much lately, and I've been thinking about my dad, who's come on to become like a pretty successful lawyer. He represented, he's been pro bono lawyer of the month. He represented a head of state of a country. It's not one of the good ones, so I'm not going to tell you which one. But he was the lawyer for a president, and his defense and trial was criminals should be allowed to import their horses to America also, and that actually held the day. But I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I just remember my dad's face when they told me I could leave the hospital, that they were going to take the staples out and I was going to be okay. And I remember his face, and it has really stayed with me because he was so much happier then than he was a week before when he had graduated law school. And in this weird way, like I feel like I just don't have anything in my life that I care about as much as he cared about me in that moment, even like a week after accomplishing his dream. And the reason I don't feel that way about anything as of right now is because I spend a lot of my time being like, who books that? Thank you.
You know, upon hearing about Sean, I just want to reiterate, do not listen to teenage boys talk about anything. Guys, that's our show. Thank you guys so much for being here. Give it up one more time for Gabe, for Bryan, for Esmond, for Jennifer, for Dawn. Give it up for Lauren, our tech wizard in the booth. Give it up for your house staff here at Under St. Mark's. Guys, we will be back in January with a new show. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. Get home safe. Thank you.